just got out of the theaters from seeing Masters of the Universe on the big screen, and we have a lot to talk about when it comes to this movie, guys. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the movie review. Let's go. Masters of the Universe is an action-adventure movie with sci-fi elements directed by Travis Knight, and inside of this film we see, after being separated for 15 years, the Sword of Power leads Prince Adam back to Eternia, where he discovers his home shattered under the fiendish rule of Skeletor. To save his family and his world, Adam must join forces with his closest allies, Teela and Duncan, and embrace his true destiny as He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe. And leading up to this film, guys, we did a ton of videos on Masters of the Universe. Okay, this was my first experience with He-Man as a character. I did not grow up with this series. I did not grow up with this show. So because of that, I was very excited to experience why all of this hype was surrounding this movie and this character. I loved all of the trailers, all of the behind the scenes videos. Again, I covered a lot of that on the channel to prepare myself for this film. And how did I like it? Okay, how did it turn out? Well, to be honest with you, I think there's a lot to love about this movie and a lot to dislike about this movie, and things that are holding it back. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into my positives for the Masters of the Universe film. And for my first positive with this film, we have to talk about Nicholas Galitzine. He is the lead in this movie. He is playing He-Man, or otherwise known as Prince Adam, and I think he does a fantastic job here. I love the physical body transformation that he went through for this role and for this film. You could tell that he took it very seriously. When I look at this guy, he looks believable as He-Man. He looks believable as this superhero-esque type of character, this action movie star, and he plays it very well here. Okay, once this movie really gets going with the fight choreography, which we'll talk about in a second, you know, he does a fantastic job in all of those scenes and with all of those elements. I love the physicality that he brought to this role. I think they did a perfect casting job for someone to fit this part and look the part, and he definitely achieves that on every single level. Now let's go ahead and move into my next positive with this film, and that would have to lead us to the antagonist of this film, Skeletor. Okay, because when it comes to Skeletor, I love the way that they designed this character. I love how accurate it looks to when I look back at that old cartoon. All right, again, I haven't seen it myself, but when I see clips and things like that of Skeletor, it looks exact. It looks like it was brought to life, like it's believable. You know, the way that they designed his costume, his skull, everything about the character and his design is fantastic. Okay, that was my favorite part when it came to Skeletor. Now, there are two more characters that I do want to highlight here, that being Idris Elba as Duncan, aka Man-at-Arms. He's sort of the army leader here for Eternia, who happens to lose his way after some unfortunate events take place, and he goes through a character arc of his own of finding himself once again after struggling with addiction. And I thought those elements were very good here. You know, Idris Elba is very believable in this role. I love all of his performances. This guy is a pro. Okay, he is the best of the best when it comes to Hollywood, and it's no different inside of this film. He's giving it his all. He's doing what the script asks of him, and he definitely delivers on what he was supposed to here. Now, one more character that we have to talk about, and this is probably my second favorite character in the film right next to He-Man, and that would be Camila Mendes playing the character of Teela. Now, Teela is this childhood friend of He-Man who hasn't seen him for 15 years like we mentioned in the synopsis, and once they reunite once again, you know, you could see the evolution of her character. You could see how different she is than when you originally seen her as a child, and she truly feels like a hero type of character. It's believable. She plays the role very well. Her on-screen presence is demanding and sometimes may even overshadow He-Man, as she gets to play the hero while he is still trying to find himself during a lot of this movie, especially in the beginning and second half. Okay, the first and second act. Now let's go ahead and touch on my next positive that I mentioned slightly when we were talking about He-Man, and that's the fight choreography. That is another one of my favorite parts of this film. Okay, I love the fight scenes here. I think they did a phenomenal job at filming them, at portraying them to the audience, at bridging that gap there to make it seem believable, make it seem real when we're getting all of these sword fights and different things like that. That part was very exciting, the different camera work techniques, not too many jump cuts. Okay, you could tell that they took the time to learn this stuff, and you could feel it when you watch these scenes take place. And there's a fight scene at the very end of this movie. You did get to see it in the trailer, so we're not in spoiler territory. territory, but it's between He-Man and Skeletor, and it is fantastic. It's phenomenal. It's one of the best scenes in the entire movie, and I really like what they did when it came to the fight choreography. Okay, now another positive that I have to touch on is the visuals. All right, the visuals are carrying this movie because this movie is beautiful. It's colorful, it's vibrant, it's full of life, okay? It's just gorgeous to look at. It's great to see on the big screen in the highest quality possible. I love the way that they designed Eternia and brought this fantastical world to life. You even get to see like the forest of Eternia. You got to see a little bit of that in the trailers too, but when you see it on the big screen, it looks magnificent. You can tell that there was a big budget behind this, and you can see exactly where a lot of the money went when it came to the making of this movie. Now, the set design is great. All right, there's so many different set designs, locations that stand out, that breathe life into this film, that make each and every scene a little bit more believable, and I enjoyed all of that stuff here. On top of that, and the last thing I'll mention here in the positive section is the sound design, okay, because I seen this in, again, the higher quality with Dolby Atmos inside of the theaters, and the sound was so crisp, it was so loud, you could hear everything loud and clear. All right, I thoroughly enjoyed my experience when it came to that element of the movie. Now, while there is a lot to like about this movie, there was a lot that I had to dislike about this film too. All right, and we have to talk about it. We have to speak about it. So let's go ahead and get into my negatives for the Masters of the Universe film. When it comes to my negatives with this movie, guys, I think a lot of it comes down to the script. All right, because this movie tries to convince you that He-Man before his transformation, right, Prince Adam before he gets his sword back 15 years later, is this wimpy type of character, but they do a terrible job at disguising it, right? This isn't like Steve Rogers in Captain America: The First Avenger, where he's this little scrawny guy who you actually believe cannot handle himself in a fist fight, yet, you know, inside of his heart, he's courageous. It's the complete opposite when it comes to Prince Adam. Okay, he is this huge, muscular guy walking around, looks like he lives and breathes inside the gym. Like I said, a fantastic physical transformation for this role. Shout out to Nicholas Galitzine for that. But the movie tries to bring it across like this guy can't handle himself at all. Like he doesn't know how to throw a punch. Like he doesn't know how to manage, you know, his weight and use his physicality whatsoever. They want you to truly believe like he is this, I don't know, this weakling. And it's completely unbelievable. I didn't buy it at all. It seems weird. You're looking at this guy, you're like, dude, you're bigger. You're like in the top 1% of humans in terms of physicality. And you want me to believe that you are this weak physical specimen. I just can't do it. Okay, I cannot suspend the disbelief there, especially once he eventually gets his He-Man powers and they do this scene of what looks to be like his muscles growing, and it's like he looked that way throughout the entire movie before the He-Man transformation. All right, so I don't know what they tried to do with that scene there. But anyway, let's move on to my next negative with this film. All right, and let's talk more about the script, because that is, again, what I want to put in your mind as to the real problem with this movie, because the budget's there, the visuals there, all that stuff is there. They got a great cast, but the script is just not strong enough for this film. All right, the dialogue here is way off, way off, and you'll know what I mean when you watch this film. All right, there's a particular moment in this movie where they're talking about Skeletor and they're trying to come up with the reason, right? He-Man's like, why can't I reason with this guy? Why can't I just go talk to him? Why is he doing all this villainous stuff? And a particular character says to him, well, it's because he's bad. And that's supposed to be like this big mic drop, like this line drop in the movie. No, terrible dialogue, okay? And there's plenty of other moments like this throughout the movie, constantly. And at times it feels like a child wrote this, honestly, like a middle schooler, you know, maybe just entered high school, wrote this film. That is the way I felt when it came to the dialogue, like it was trying its hardest to appeal to children. And that's another point I want to make. This entire film feels like its target audience is children. All right, it doesn't feel like it knows that its target audience is a bit older, because a lot of the people that are going to be going out to see this film are adults who grew up with He-Man, right? They're a lot older than I am, because I did not grow up with this show. All right, so they have this older demographic, and this is supposed to be like a family movie, right? You're really supposed to appeal to all generations, the older demographic with the nostalgia element, to someone more in the middle like me, to the younger demographic, the children who you want to get into this stuff and go out to see your next movie and, you know, request that their parents bring them to see this film. And again, a lot of that older generation has children now, and they're going to be bringing their children to see this film. So I get it on that aspect, but man, the dialogue here doesn't bridge the gap from that older audience to the youngest audience. It seems like it was just more specifically worried about appealing to children. That's how a lot of this movie felt, especially with the tone. And another thing that we have to touch on that I did not like, and you may have noticed it when I mentioned Skeletor, that I didn't mention anything about the performance, okay? I just talked about the character design, things like that. And the reason that is because the performance here, it falls apart at so many different moments here, all right? And I feel bad for Jared Leto. I feel like time after time he keeps getting into these superhero type of films. I know this isn't exactly a superhero film, but the way they play about it, it's like a superhero origin story, okay? That's pretty much what this movie is. So with Jared Leto's character Skeletor, which by the way, until I got ready to do this review, I wasn't even aware that that was Jared Leto. So again, great job on that, on blending into the character. But the design for the character is fantastic. All right, and he's supposed to be this villainous guy, and I get it. It comes from a cartoon and they're trying to appeal to children. I get it, but how many times they undercut the seriousness and the villainy of Skeletor throughout this movie is ridiculous, guys. All right, so many times it's like he's getting on a good monologue. He's giving us this villainous monologue that's going to be like, okay, this is going to be one of those scenes that you can look back on from many years from now. And the moment you feel like that, the moment you're thinking that, they just undercut the scene completely with a comedic scene. Okay, he'll give this great villainous monologue, and then the very next moment they're undercutting it with a joke. They're making him look ridiculous. They're making you not take Skeletor seriously at all, to the point where you can't even respect him as a villain. You can't even respect any of this evil bidding that he's doing. All right, it loses all of its tension so many times throughout this film. They undercut the more serious, the more emotional moments that the audience is really supposed to fill with a comedic moment. They used comedy way too much throughout this film, to the point where you can't even take the movie seriously at all, and any of the plot seriously at all. And don't get me wrong, some of the jokes I liked here throughout this movie, when they aren't undercutting those great moments with just comedy to ruin it all, when they're just having a straight up comedic scene, some of those are good. The other half of them are bad, horrendous, like terrible writing, who came up with these jokes type of humor. A lot of the emotional moments and emotional beats throughout this film missed the mark a lot of the time because of that. But even sometimes, you know, when they weren't going to undercut it with humor, which is like once or twice throughout the movie, the moment just doesn't hit there. There's a moment inside of this movie where we're watching who's supposed to be, you know, an important figure in this movie come to his end in what I would call a very ridiculous way. By the way, once I look back at the film, again, not to drop spoilers, but I gotta talk about it to the best of our ability, okay? That moment right there does not hit harder than what happens to like a robot later in the film. Like a robot, something that's technological, that's not supposed to have feelings and emotions tied to it. I felt more for the robot inside of this movie than I did a lot of the human characters, which felt, again, very off and very weird, and I didn't expect that out of this film whatsoever. Now let's address my final negative when it comes to this film that I want to highlight, that I want to touch on, and that would be the relationship between He-Man and Teela. They play it up throughout this entire movie like it's going to be some big payoff between these two characters, and then again they undercut that for a joke completely, and it loses all of its buildup. It loses all of its meaning there, to the point where you're like, well, why were you even hinting at that in the first place and making it seem like we were going to head in a direction where these characters can potentially explore a relationship, when that's just completely undermined. They're just friends. You friend zone the hero in his own movie. All right, this superhero-esque type of character that children are eventually supposed to be looking up to, that, you know, these older generations, people from the past, are nostalgic about and grew up with. You undercut the hero, you friend zone the hero in his own movie. So disrespectful, honestly. But let's go ahead and move into my overall review for the Masters of the Universe movie. Guys, when it comes to this movie, all right, there's a lot to like here. You could tell that the budget is clearly here. Mattel put a lot of money into this movie. The visuals are gorgeous. The sound design is gorgeous. The score, oh, I forgot to mention the score in the positive section. That may be my favorite part of this entire movie. The music here is so rich. It's so inspiring. It elevates every single scene to to a point where it probably shouldn't even be elevated to during particular points in this movie. And man, they knocked it out of the park when it comes to the score and the soundtrack. I loved the movie when it came to that department. The costume design was great. All right, Skeletor, the design of Skeletor, fantastic stuff here. One of my favorite parts in the entire movie, easily. The cast here is fantastic. They got great actors for these roles. I love the supporting role by Idris Elba. Okay, I love the vibrant colors. I love the visuals. I love the set design. I love the way Eternia looks and just falling into that fantastical world. All of that stuff is great. They did all of that perfectly. But when it comes to what really makes a movie a film, right? When we're talking character development, when we're talking script and dialogue and stories, this movie damn near falls apart completely. All right, this zero to hero story that they try to give He-Man, it's unbelievable. You don't buy it, especially with the physicality. I don't know. They should have did something, like I said, very Steve Rogers-esque from the first Avenger to make it more believable, but you just don't buy it. When you watch this movie, you'll know exactly what I mean. The dialogue is terrible. The jokes are very hit or miss. A lot of the time, I would say it's more leaning towards the miss territory. The target audience here seems to be little kids and children, and at the end of the day, this movie doesn't have a message that it's trying to convey to its audience. It really doesn't. All right, this is Mattel's second outing here, right? They did the Barbie movie. That was a smash success, a hit movie. But when it comes to this film, I do not think it's going to have the same effect as the Barbie movie did, because what made the Barbie movie work with all of that money and all of that budget behind it and all of those fantastic casts and actors that they casted for the film, what made it work was the script, was the story that they were telling, was the message that they were trying to convey to the audience, and all of that type of stuff is missing here. All right, this movie feels hollow. It doesn't feel like it has a soul. It feels like a classic Hollywood blockbuster movie that you just go out to turn off your brain at, eat popcorn, and just enjoy the visuals and have a laugh here or there. In the lead up to this film, I was comparing it a lot to Thor Ragnarok because that's what the trailers were kind of making it seem like. But instead of getting a Thor Ragnarok here, we ended up getting a Thor Love and Thunder. And if you went to see Love and Thunder, if you've seen that movie, you know exactly what I'm trying to say when I say that, okay? Now, the last 20 minutes of this movie, 25 minutes, are like the best part of this movie easily. All right, that last 20 minutes is damn near what we should have gotten throughout this entire film. I felt like what they were really going for with this movie, you can capture all of that in the final 20 minutes of this film, but the rest of it, it's just lost upon us. And with that being said, let's just go ahead and drop my official rating for the Masters of the Universe. If I had to rate this film, I would give this movie a 6.5 out of 10. It gets the 6.5 out of 10. Listen, if you want to go out and see this movie, I would recommend you do it at a matinee, and that's if you need to see this movie. Like if you are a He-Man super fan, if you're nostalgic of this character, if you grew up with the show, all of those sorts of things, then this is probably going to be a movie for you. This is probably going to be worth watching at the very least at a matinee. But if you did not grow up with He-Man like me, if you are being introduced to this character, if this is all brand new to you, I would recommend you wait to watch this movie at home on a streaming platform, whichever one they put it on, because to be honest, after watching this film, this felt like Netflix background noise. This feels like something you throw on when you're cleaning the house, when you're getting some work done, you just need something playing in the background. That is what this movie is, okay? This movie is going to appeal to children. If you're under the age of 10 or below, your kid is probably going to love this. But if you're older than that, I can't really see this being for you unless you're nostalgic of this movie. Now, the marketing for this film was great. Like I said, we covered it a lot in the lead up. I loved the marketing. It sold the movie for me. It made me want to go watch this in theaters, but after seeing it, I couldn't be more disappointed here. I was definitely let down with the theatrical experience for this film, and I do not think it lived up to the hype. I do not think it lived up to expectations, at least the expectations I set for it, because like I said, the marketing was fantastic. So those are my thoughts on this film, guys. I'm curious to know your thoughts on Masters of the Universe down in the comment section down below. Do not kill me in the comment section, okay? It's just my opinion on the film, guys. I'm curious to know your opinion down in the comment section down below. If you don't know what we do here on Demigod, we do film, TV, and pop culture based content. So if you're interested in this type of content, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you in the next one, guys. Peace.